Hi, so today it was confirmed that the Prime Minister Theresa May is going to face a vote of no confidence. In fact, well, when you've watched this, it's probably already happened. You already know the results. As I'm recording it, it's going to happen quite soon, but that's not the point of this video. What I'm going to talk about is the speech she gave in front of number 10 Downing Street, and to go through the various aspects of it, which I think are downright lies, and then the other aspects of it, which are sort of true as well. And basically, it's my analysis of her speech, and I'll read out the various captions as well. So let's get straight onto it, because it may take a little while. So the first thing she said was a bit of an introduction to how long she's been in the party, all that lot. Okay, that's all true, that's fine. So then she said, I stood to be leader because I believe in the Conservative vision for a better future, a thriving economy with nowhere and nobody left behind, a stronger society where everyone can make the most of their talents, always serving the national interest. Thriving economy. So here's the thing. The Conservative Party came to power, first of all, in 2010. It was a little bit after the global crash. The economy crashed. We were in a recession. And at the time, of course, they blamed that on Labour, as you would. The opposition party, of course, when there's economic trouble, you, of course, blame the party in government. But, of course, this was a global economy and a global situation, sorry. But what they've since admitted, that it was wrong. They were lying about it. But anyway, that doesn't matter. What matters is what they did about it. So it doesn't matter where the blame lies for the global crash. What matters is, did they do what a lot of people think? A lot of people think the Conservative Party are the fiscally responsible ones, the ones who know how to manage an economy. They said they were going to get the national debt down. They haven't. So if we have a little look at how the national debt's gone, so you can sort of see, it was reasonably stable, a little bit under 40% of our GDP. And then it rocketed up a bit. Of course, when you've got a crash like that, what you do, you spend your way out of it, which is exactly what the Labour government did, went up. And then you look at this and you actually see that under the Conservatives, it's gone up and up and up and up and a long way up as well. Not just the big jump up that was necessary to deal with that financial crash. It jumped up a long way. Now, I know you could look at this, and I could look at this, and I could maybe imagine, well, I've not studied economics in that much detail. Maybe this would have happened whoever was in government. Maybe this is just a natural consequence. It was such a big crash. We had to spend such a lot of money doing it. It's a bit like if you imagine a person who suddenly had loads of things they had to get. They had to get a load of debts out, loads of loans out, and it's going to take a while to manage those and get yourself back in good shape. So, yeah, we can understand that. So is this just a natural consequence and it's got nothing to do with the Conservatives? They've tried, but there's been factors out of their control. So what we need to do is we need to compare it to a similar economy. How about Germany? So if we look at the same situation for Germany. Now, just bear in mind in terms of the relative proportions in the step-ups, it's a little bit misleading on the Germany one because the bar charts don't start from 0, they start from about 60, whereas ours start from 0. But what I'm talking about is the pattern. So you can see there again, in the wake of the financial crash, their debt as a proportion of their GDP went up very, very significantly. Okay, but what you can also see is that since then, it's come back down. So that proves that the Conservatives, if they'd have actually known how to manage the economy, if they were actually the fiscally responsible party, there's no reason why they couldn't have done exactly the same thing. So the idea of a thriving economy is a complete lie. They either don't know how to do it or they simply don't care and would like to just get people to believe that they're the party to be responsible with the country's finances. But anyway, I could do a whole video just on that. Then there's the other part of it, the idea that nobody is left behind. Well, the problem there is child poverty makes that all but impossible. In fact, it was just announced against today. There are 1 million children in the UK in poverty, in what was being described as Dickensian levels of poverty. The sort of poverty which means that if a kid needs something for school, like a school trip, and it's only a couple of quid needed for the contribution, the parents just cannot afford it. A quid for stationery, can't afford it. Maybe at home it's not a conducive area for study, so there's maybe nowhere quiet with a desk where they can sit down and do their homework properly. Consequence, they're not going to do their homework properly. If they can't afford decent food, then that means their nutrition is going to suffer. Basically, there's at least 1 million kids who are basically buggered in terms of intellectual development, Some exceptional ones may well break their way out of it. Some of them, may well be really good at sport and become a top footballer or cricketer or something like that. Some of them may be creative in other areas and find their way out. But an awful lot of those children are getting left behind, and getting left behind hard, because the government is allowing people to be in, and we're not just talking poverty. Obviously, there's always going to be poverty in terms of comparing yourself between the richest and the poorest. But in terms of such severe levels of poverty that these kids cannot take advantage of the opportunities this society is supposed to provide, and certainly cannot take the opportunities of their natural talent. Then she said, and at this crucial moment in our history, that means securing a Brexit deal that delivers on the result of the EU referendum. But people didn't vote for what she's trying to do. People voted to leave the EU. The question was, and I agree it was a poorly worded referendum question, but it was nonetheless, do you want to stay in the EU? Do you want to leave it? That's it. They didn't vote to leave the customs union. They didn't vote to leave the single market. And here's the thing. Now, if all of the Leave campaigners, all the Brexiteers, were saying we need to leave the EU and we need to leave the customs union, we need to leave the single market, then you might be able, I only say might, but you might be able to argue, well, actually, all the Leave campaigners campaigned for us to leave, say, the single market. So that is actually what people voted for, even if it didn't explicitly say it in the referendum, the ballot. However, although I think the Leave campaigners were generally talking about leaving the customs union, what they all said is that we will stay in the single market. Granted, it's not what some of them have said since, but in the lead up to the referendum itself, every single one of them was saying, of course, we're going to stay in the single market. So it is wholly untrue to say that people voted to leave the single market. So why are we? Then she said, taking back control of our borders, laws and money, but protecting jobs, our security and our precious union as we do so. But the thing is, we're losing control of our borders, because the EU countries will no longer stop people illegally travelling into the UK. After all, it's saving them a problem if they can just shoo people past. And we haven't expanded our border force, we haven't recruited to be able to compensate for that. Because this is the issue. People talk about immigration. Legal migration is brilliant for our economy. It's the illegal immigration that is a problem. And that is going to get much worse because we do not have the border force already to prevent levels of illegal immigration. And now it's going to be much more pronounced. So then about jobs. Well, jobs are guaranteed to go. If we leave the single market, the EU is very protectionist. Now, it doesn't matter whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. If you're going to argue that for global trade it's a bad thing, well, I'm going to agree with you. Of course, protectionism is bad for global trade. But the EU are protectionist. At the moment, we're in that protectionist bubble because we're part of the EU. As soon as we leave it, they will make it very difficult for us to trade within the EU, which is where a lot of businesses now are selling their products. And that means those businesses will go under. And people have these fantasies about, oh, what about other, you'll go sell to China or something like that. They don't want our goods. Some businesses may be able to find some other areas around the world where they can sell them, but they won't be able to sell them as, and I only say some, they won't be able to sell them as cheaply as right next door because you've got extra transport costs. And a lot of the economies that people are talking about also have protectionist policies in place. So we're still going to be undercut by the markets that already exist in those other countries where apparently we want to trade with. Because remember, as soon as we crash out the EU, if it happens with like a no deal, especially, we have no trade deals with any other country. So WTO terms, which means, businesses more local there don't have such high transport costs. And of course, they're not going to be paying tariffs. So they're going to have to slash prices. Well, that's going to send a lot of businesses out of business anyway, because some of them already don't make that much of a profit. And then in terms of laws, our laws are massively under threat. Many Tory MPs specifically want to leave the EU so we can scrap human rights laws. All right. That was known because at the Chequers meeting, for example, when they were talking about various things, someone spied on someone's work that was underlining about the fact that we'd be tied to the European Human Rights Convention as a bad thing. We came up with it, actually, first of all. But that doesn't matter. they want to remove that from us. We already have amongst the poorest human rights in the EU. And they want to remove what few we have, the ones we only have due to European laws that all members of the EU have to accept. So it's not protecting our laws either. Then she said, through good times and bad over the last 2 years, my passionate belief that such a deal is attainable, that a bright future lies ahead for our country, has not wavered, and it is now within our grasp. What good times in the last 2 years? The only good times I can think in the last 2 years are when England was getting to the semi-finals of the World Cup. But the thing about that is, not everyone in England cares about that. And I'm pretty sure that most people in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland really didn't give a shit at all. So I'm not sure what good times she's talking about. Unless she's talking about personal good times for her. Yeah, that must be it. Yeah, she'll have meant that. Then she said, I spent yesterday meeting Chancellor Merkel, Prime Minister Rutte, President Tusk and President Juncker to address the concerns that MPs have with the backstop, and we are making progress. The MPs didn't want assurances. The MPs already had assurances. What they were saying is, we can't live on assurances. We want things in paper, signed, sealed and deliver. After all, they are politicians. They lie, cheat and steal. They're certainly not going to believe the assurances of other politicians who do exactly the same thing. They want it written down. Not intentions, assurances. Now, I will accept that it's impossible for Prime Minister to get those assurances. I accept that, that written down and formalised. I get that. But going to Europe to get assurances was not what was required. What should have happened was, that vote should have just gone ahead, been lost, strategy change. Then she says, I was to travel to Dublin this afternoon to continue that work, but will now remain here in London to make the case for my leadership with my parliamentary colleagues. I think this is now the part of the speech where she's making little attacks on MPs who might sort of vote against her. I think this is a thinly veiled attack on the MPs who triggered this vote of no confidence in her leadership, because the implication being that what she was going to be doing today was working hard to get issues over the backstop sorted for Brexit, to give MPs what they were asking for. But now she can't do it because she's got to go and fight for her place. So that's their MP's fault. Then she said, a change of leadership in the Conservative Party will now put our country's future at risk and create uncertainty where we can least afford it. Well, it does create uncertainty. The markets today have reflected that. Actually, it's quite funny. To a certain extent, the market's rallied a bit because of the prospect of her not being able to carry on, and therefore potentially a new leader having to postpone or cancel the exit date, where the markets, of course, would love that. And that should tell you something. And all this idea about that businesses will flourish under a Brexit, that should tell you something, because at the prospect of the fact that our exit from the EU may be put back or even cancelled, the markets rallied a bit. But the uncertainty also caused problems as well. And the thing is as well, now, let's say I were a Tory MP. Let's say I just lost my marbles. So let's say I was a Tory MP. I'd be thinking about this, and I would think to myself, I would definitely vote in favour of Theresa May today. I mean, apart from the fact it's already considered, I think, even in Conservative circles, that the MPs who've triggered this vote are considered to be just having a temper tantrum, and it's by MPs who want all of the benefits of being in a powerful political party but take none of the responsibility. But I would vote in favour of her, and the reason is this: not because I think she's doing a great job, not necessarily even because I think she's doing a better job than someone else might. I don't know. The reason is, if I were a Remain Tory MP, by voting to get rid of Theresa May, I raised the prospect of a hardline Brexiteer becoming the next Prime Minister. Well, that would be a bit of a disaster, that. Whereas if I were a Leave Tory MP, then I create the scenario where maybe a Europhile Prime Minister is next. Well, that would, from that point of view, be a disaster as well. It's a huge risk. It's a massive risk. I gather that one of the main things that Theresa May is trying to plug to try and get people to vote for her is everyone fears that she'd be there to run the next general election, which they don't want because she made such an arse of the last one. Although that being said, She did make such an arse of the last one, to the point where you feel she may have learnt and actually might be the ideal one to take them into the next one. Because someone new, full of arrogance, might make those same mistakes themselves, or indeed whole new ones. But anyway, what she's apparently saying to them and assuring them of, she has no intention of going to the next general election. She just wants to get the country through Brexit and then step down. So that may sway a few. But as I say, if I were a Tory MP, I would vote for her just because, there is no compromise candidate. No such thing as a compromise candidate. She's the closest thing to it. So anyone else you get in is going to be more on one side than another. And it may be on the very far side of where you are. Next thing she said, a new leader wouldn't be in place by the 21st of January legal deadline, so a leadership election risks handing control of the Brexit negotiations to the opposition MPs in Parliament. So, again, more threats. This time she's threatening them with the opposition. Always a good one to do. Rally people around a cause. Do you want us to go into a general election and the opposition then get into power? Or do you just want to give the opposition more power in Parliament? Because that's effectively what happened when the government were found in contempt of Parliament. So that's always a good one. Reminding MPs that the opposition is a force now to be reckoned with. Something David Cameron should have done a bit more, I should think. Next thing says, the new leader wouldn't have time to negotiate a withdrawal agreement and get the legislation through Parliament by the 29th of March. So one of their first acts would have to be extending or rescinding Article 50, delaying or even stopping Brexit when people want us to get on with it. So basically what she's saying, given that it's mostly, not necessarily exclusively, but mostly Brexiteers who will have triggered this vote, she's basically telling them that they're acting against their own self-interest. Because she's basically saying, if you get what you want and me out of number 10, then that means we're not leaving the EU on the 29th of March, and that's all there is to it, is what she's basically saying. Then she said, and a leadership election would not change the fundamentals of the negotiation or the parliamentary arithmetic. This is perfectly true. It doesn't. The EU are not going to make any changes just because there's a new Prime Minister. There simply isn't time. And they all know that. There is not time. There aren't the numbers in Parliament to go ahead with this deal or with no deal. That only leaves extending or cancelling, as she's just said. Then she says, weeks spent tearing ourselves apart will only create more division, just as we should be standing together to serve our country. None of that would be in the national interest. The only people whose interest would be served are Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell. So if you're not aware, those are the two key figures within the opposition party. So again, threatening her MPs with the bogeymen of the opposition. She's no longer simply talking about the opposition now, but specifically the two opposition MPs that the Tories fear the most. Again, if Cameron had done that, we'd have never had Brexit in the first place. Remember, David Cameron only had the referendum to stop his party splitting. It's more split than ever. It's like the stupidest thing ever. It was like, I can hardly think of a stupider political decision. And it was like, it literally was the stupidest thing anyone has done since the Carthaginians pulled back their forces when they were about to ruffle stomp Rome. So it's laid those divisions bare. But if he'd have said to them, stop arguing, otherwise the opposition are going to get in. Do you want Labour in at the next general election? No, you do not. Shut up. And, but he didn't. He went, I'll give you a referendum then. Guaranteed to split anyway. Then she said, the British people want us to get on with it, and they want us to focus on the other vital issues that matter to them too, building a stronger economy, delivering first-class public services and the homes that families need. Well, the economy's got weaker and weaker since they took office. They only manage to look okay sometimes because they fiddle the employment figures by counting people with 0 hours contracts, or those who don't earn enough to be able to manage without benefits. Because the simple fact of the matter is, if employment figures were genuinely buoyant, in other words, people were employed to the point where they can support themselves with the wages they earn, then actually we would be more than chipping away at this national debt. The fact is we don't. We count people as employed when they're not actually working at all. It's just a huge fiddle. In terms of first-class public services, they've never been further away. Cuts across the board on public services and increased privatisation, which effectively cuts even more. Because when you've got a private company delivering a public service, they have to pay for all the same things that a publicly run, like a government-run service would. as well as siphon off as much money as possible for profit for the shareholders. So that's like adding extra costs. Taxpayer money going straight into someone's bank account for doing nout. As for the homes, well, such an arse has been made of that, and we've not had enough building of new homes for a very long time, and that, got to concede, that's not just the Conservative government. The previous Labour government were just as guilty of that. But in the situation we're in now, in order to try and now tackle it, we're ending up with homes that are not fit to live in. Because builders are cutting corners, using dodgy mortar. So people are buying new houses, paying a lot of money, and are not able to live in them because they're not structurally sound, having to take the builders to court if those builders don't face up to their responsibilities and all the rest of it. Complete nightmare. So that's not happening either. They're showing that they're not capable of delivering the new homes that we do actually need building. They've demonstrated that already. And then she says, these are the public's priorities. They must be the Conservative Party's priorities too. We must and we shall deliver on the referendum vote and seize the opportunities that lie ahead. So I've already said the referendum vote result was to leave the EU. That was it. It wasn't to leave all of the EU institutions. That wasn't specified. And she says, but the Conservatives must not be a single issue party. We are a party of the whole nation, moderate, pragmatic, mainstream, committed to reuniting our country and building a country that works for everyone. The agenda I set out in my first speech outside this front door. Now, I have sympathy for people in the Conservative Party who are genuinely moderate. There are people who are. But I think anyone looking at the Conservative Party right now cannot possibly say that it is. Yesterday, there was a Tory MP who basically blamed this whole thing on Ireland. They say it's all Ireland's fault. They should know their place. That is an appalling thing to say. And what was it? Now, okay, you can say to yourself, well, what one person says does not represent the whole party. No, it doesn't. But here's the thing. No one in the Conservative Party expressed shock and horror at what that person said. That basically says that the wider Conservative Party are okay with that statement. Individuals may not make it themselves in public, but they're actually, didn't bat an eyelid when he says it, they're okay with him saying it. That means that party is far from moderate. I was appalled. And I think it's just that, no fuss was made because it's the sort of statement you expect to come from them. So it's not a moderate party. As for being committed to reuniting the country, it is united at the moment. All right, there's a lot of people who don't agree on things. But the fact that we have this polar views in terms of in or out is, again, entirely down to the Conservatives. So they can't say they're uniting the country. And also, as a direct result of the Conservative Party's actions, direct result, this had no cross-party support and this had got nothing to do with the Labour government before them. They have put us on a course that means the potential, if not likely, separation of Scotland from the Union. And goodness knows what would happen to Northern Ireland. Who knows? That could be chaos again. So how is that reuniting our country when it's very likely to split it up? And the country I was born in may no longer exist in a few years. So the last thing she said was, delivering the Brexit people voted for, building a country that works for everyone. I have devoted myself unsparingly to these tasks ever since I became Prime Minister, and I stand ready to finish the job. What I would say is any hope Theresa May had of suggesting that she has devoted herself to these tasks was completely obliterated when she refused an order from Parliament, which resulted in Parliament voting that the government were in contempt of them because she refused to publish legal advice. She did say, admittedly, that it's not normal practice, and it's not normal practice, although I think it always should be, but it isn't normal practice. But Parliament had specifically said, no, you're publishing it in full, and she refused to do that. So the fact that she was held in contempt of Parliament means she's not devoting herself to the cause at all. And the fact that she also then cancelled a vote at the 11th hour is again really showing contempt to Parliament. One person deciding whether or not they're going to vote on an issue that Parliament wants to vote on. Parliament wants to vote on this issue, and she's now saying, no, I'm not doing that now. We'll do it. We'll do it in a month's time. In fact, it's more than a month. She's trying to get it put forward. When is it? Like the 21st of January or something like that? So So she can't say that she's devoted at all to this institution. So anyway, that's what she had to say. That's my analysis of it. As always, I know you're going to put your comments down below and what you think about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.